Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Strategic Planning Committee today. We'll get straight on with the agenda. So our first item is membership of the committee. We're all here. We've got no apologies, so well done, everybody. Next one, minutes of the previous meeting. Is everyone happy with the minutes? Is there any comments? Councillor Sokol, you got a comment? No comments, just happy with it. Okay. We'll take those as a correct record then. Declarations of interest and lobbying will go around the room. Councillor Sokol, do you want to go first?
None, Chair.
Yes, the item on Kenmore Drive, I have had conversations with the objector, but I have always made it clear that I keep an open mind when I come to a planning committee meeting, and albeit that I might be sympathetic to what he has to tell me, I will always say that I will listen to and read all the documentation and come to my own conclusion. But on another level, if you're talking to somebody who is in your ward, you do try to represent what they tell you. But that needs to be balanced with the role of a member of the planning committee. So I've been very conscious of that. Thank you, Chair.
None, Chair.
None, Chair.
None, sir.
None for me too. Okay, no, item 4, admission of the public. It's a public meeting. We're on webcast 2. We intend to have the meeting entirely in public. So that's fine. Public question time. Any questions?
No questions, Chair.
Deputations or petitions?
No deputations or petitions, Chair.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to the planning applications. We undertook a site visit this morning, and we'll go straight into the application at agenda item 9. So, Louise, I'll hand over to you on the Kenmore Drive.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Louise Bearcroft. I'm a senior planner in the Majors and Minerals team. The site is land off Kenmore Drive, which lies northwest of Cleckheaton Town Centre. Planning permission was previously granted for an extra care residential development of 80 apartments for affordable rent. Construction works are underway and the building is substantially completed. The site is bordered by neighbouring residential properties to all boundaries. The application is made under Section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act to vary the wording of Condition 2, which states development must be undertaken in accordance with the approved plans and is reported to committee at the request of Councillor Pinnock. The amendments sought include installing 4 air source heat pumps, a plant area and substation, as well as revision to the siting and size of the bin store. These photographs show the relevant part of the site to the south of the building, looking south and west. These photographs were taken showing views looking south and to the east. And this is the proposed layout of the site. The 4 air source heat pumps will be sited south of the building in an enclosure with timber boarding, and the design incorporates a pergola-style roof. The plant room would be of brick construction with a single-ply flat roof. The substation would be sited south of the building and be of brick construction and would have a hipped roof. And the siting of the substation necessitates revision to the siting and size of the approved bin store. The store would be located further west and its capacity reduced from 22 bins to 16. The store would also be of timber construction with a pergola-style roof. Significant concern has been raised in the representations regarding potential noise and vibration impacts. The applicant has considered 4 potential locations which were viewed on site this morning. The first north of the building, which was discounted for reasons of restricted access, impact on levels and planting, and being obtrusive from the area of adjacent public open space. Location 2 was west of the building, and that was discounted for restricted access, security risk adjacent a public footpath, and impact on a property which has a deck balcony. Location 3 was a void under the building. This was discounted due to insufficient height for airflow. And location 4 to the south of the building is the option presented in this application. The noise impact assessment has been assessed by KC Environmental Health. It identifies the nearest noise-sensitive receptors as a dwelling 15 metres from the proposed air source heat pump compound. That's 4 Coach House Paddocks at Vine Avenue, a dwelling 55 metres east, which is 12 Milton Terrace, and a dwelling 73 metres west, 14 Kenmore Drive. The assessment has been conducted on a worst case scenario. After applying corrections for tonality and intermittency, the report identifies an exceedance equating to a significant adverse impact at 4 Coach House Paddocks at night time. As such, mitigation is required. 3 options are presented in the noise report, and the application has chosen option 2, which includes retaining the proposed air source heat pump compound in its location, fitting a bolt-on acoustic kick to all air source heat pump units, and increasing the height of the compound walls to 2.6 metres. KC Environmental Health note the worst case noise impact assessment for option 2 results in no exceedance equating to a low impact to 4 Coach House Paddocks. Consideration has been given to low frequency emissions from the substation, and the report shows no exceedances at this property. KC Environmental Health accept the findings based upon implementation of one of the 3 mitigation options. Officers have also secured amended plans to reduce the dimensions of the air source heat pump enclosure and thereby site it further from the boundary, and have also secured additional landscaping. Following further publicity, an objection was received which raises detailed technical matters, and in response, a rebuttal from the applicant's acoustic consultant has been provided. The rebuttal has been assessed by Environmental Health, who accept the reasoning and justification in line with accepted guidance and best practice. They recommend officers condition the offer to conduct a further assessment to ensure all assumptions are validated. This would be in line with condition number 17 of the original permission, that requires that all combined noise from fixed mechanical services and external plant and equipment does not exceed background sound level at any time. In conclusion, officers support the recommendations from Environmental Health that the findings of the noise report are accepted based on implementation of one of the 3 mitigation options. Officers recommend 3 additional conditions. 1, that all works that form part of the option 2 mitigation identified in the noise report shall be completed and retained thereafter. 2, that a validation report for the assumptions on the noise report shall be provided. And 3, a condition to deliver the proposed mitigative planting scheme to screen the air source heat pump compounds and plant compound. In respect of other impacts on amenity, this sectional drawing on the screen shows the relationship of the proposal to neighbouring property 4 Coach House Paddocks. The compound and plant area will sit below ground level of the neighbouring property, and the continuation of the retaining wall will allow for a mitigative planting scheme to be provided as additional planting to the approved landscaping scheme. Officers considered there would be no detrimental overbearing impact or loss of outlook. In respect to visual amenity, officers raised no objections to the design of the air source heat pump enclosure, plant room, the substation or the bin store. In terms of the proposal to necessitate a revision to the site inside of the store, this will be located further west and the capacity reduced from 22 bins to 16. The Waste Collection Authority raised no objection to the reduction in capacity, and following the receipt of further information are satisfied that the proposal would allow safe and efficient collection of waste from the site. The variation is not considered to impact upon any other material planning considerations which remain as previously assessed. As this is an application under Section 73, an approval would result in the issuing of a new permission, and the decision notice should set out all conditions imposed on the new permission and reinstate conditions imposed on earlier permissions that continue to have effect. In conclusion, officer recommendation is for approval, subject to the conditions listed and a planning obligation to secure via a supplemental Section 106 the previous contributions that were secured. And this has regard to the update and the officer correction that all units proposed are for affordable rent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go to comments on this one, or representations on this one. So I've got Joel Purnell.
Hi.
Hi. So you'll have 3 minutes to make your representation. There is a timer there, so hopefully you can see it. So when you're ready, you can start.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. My name is Joel Purnell. I live with my family at the only property adjacent to the southern edge of Kenmore Drive site. I work from home as a studio musician and online educator, so a quiet environment is vital to my livelihood. 5 years after approval, and with external construction now complete, this amendment adds 4 industrial air source heat pumps, a plant room and a substation along the shared boundary beside my house. The heat pumps face my north facade, directly below our bedroom windows, with the substation sitting beyond my northwest corner. Although the site spans 1.7 hectares with a 120-metre southern edge, all 3 units have been placed beside the only existing dwelling. With the bin store and kitchen extract already in the same area, this concentrates the service infrastructure around my home, effectively trading my existing amenity to benefit future site residents and turning a quiet semi-rural home setting into a mechanical service zone. The applicant's noise assessment predicts a 12 decibel nighttime exceedance at my property once BS 4142 corrections are applied, a significant observed adverse effect under national policy. Under Condition 17, council officers accepted the scheme only on the assurance that mitigation would be built as modelled, yet the approved drawings don't secure critical details, leaving compliance effectively unenforceable and reliant on post-installation testing. This reactive approach permits exceedance before correction, removing the preventative safeguard already set in 2020. Another major structural factor overlooked is that my house is built on a pile-founded slab with underfloor cavity, prone to low-frequency noise residence, something I experience daily during the site works. The application's acoustic model only considers higher frequency bands, omitting the lower ranges where structural resonance occurs. The report also relies on monitoring from November 2024 taken before the southern annex facing my home was built, so it fails to represent current conditions or how the now completed structure reflects and amplifies sound across my boundary, leaving the overall acoustic impact unquantified. The applicant admits that this infrastructure was omitted from the original plans for reasons unknown, while rejecting other locations on questionable grounds, yet the consequences of that lack of foresight now rest solely on my household. In recent months, they proposed relocating the heat pumps and plant room to the car park area about 33 metres from my home. A simple, practical change acceptable to all parties, removing the source of objection and any noise impact. Regrettably, the applicant withdrew without explanation, readopting a layout their own consultants acknowledge as harmful, failing to mitigate at source and acting contrary to policies LP24 and LP52. To conclude, approving the scheme as it stands would embed a preventable problem into this development. A refusal today would not delay progress but give the committee a chance to recommend the applicant adopt an alternative layout further from my boundary, a fair balanced solution that safeguards my family's well-being and home work environment. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got Ricky Bowden, the applicant.
Hello.
Yeah, you've got 3 minutes too, and the clock's down there. Start when you're ready.
So I've only registered to speak, not to sell the plan. I think we've done enough to satisfy all the complaints so far in the rebuttal and the application. I just wanted it to be made known that we're here to answer any questions if possible, if required.
Okay, thanks you. And Tom Watkins, do you want to make any representation now? Or?
No, it's the same for me. I'm just here to answer any questions.
Okay, fine, thank you. Okay, so that's all the speakers, so over to members, really. Who wants to go? Yep, Councillor Pinnock.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was me who referred this to the committee because I think that there are all sorts of important principles raised here, and I want to say right from the beginning that I and my ward colleagues are totally in support of this proposed development because it provides a much needed facility for local people and will, I think, be welcomed by the majority of the local population. However, these things should never be done at any price, and I think there is evidence that putting the air source heat pumps, particularly in this location, will cause a nuisance to residents. If one looks at the documents sent in support of this application, it's fairly clear that the noise consultant thought that a location immediately under the window of this house at the back was totally totally unsuitable and would need remediation, and then that assumes that a remediation is possible I think we have had evidence from the objector that remediation on this in this position is difficult, and so therefore one perhaps needs to look at alternative locations. Now, when we went on site this morning, we did look at some other locations, not next to this particular site, but on the other side of the new building. And for all sorts of reasons, those, I would argue, are not acceptable for all sorts of different reasons, actually. But it does seem to me, and regardless of what has appeared in the evidence put forward so far, I would look at this as a member of the planning committee, looking at the site and so on, and say, is there any way in which we can move this a bit further to the west so that it's not immediately outside the only house, as the objector said, the only house that is quite so close to the site? If we could move that further away from the house, and the nuisance would be greatly mitigated. I'm not absolutely certain that it would be removed entirely, but because we are dealing here with low-level noise and vibration rather than low-level noise and vibration that is going on all the time. Not some things that can be at a higher level that can be measured. I think on the basis of what we've got in front of us at the moment, I'm not happy to support the recommendation, but I will be interested to hear what my colleagues have to say on this subject.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, really. If the planning officer of the case and maybe even the developer, if they can explain to us, me in particular, in layman's terms, exactly why they've decided to put it straight underneath the house instead of anywhere else on the site, I'd be more than interested to listen to their explanation, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, I'll come back to that in a second. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. It was worth the site visit today to actually see what the mitigations that the application was looking at, particularly around the wall. But I do feel that it would have a detrimental impact on the coach house. The continuous background noise, it's 24/7 and it's a humming sound. It'll be constant all the time and it's living with that. I think the officer, did you say there was a decibel reading of 12, but you can obviously come back to me. I'm a little bit worried that are we neglecting LP24 on the noise policy disturbance? I'm not too sure around that, but I do think it's about the impact, and if it's impacting on 1 or 100 people, there's an impact there, and I think that we need to be looking at that. So I'll just leave it there. I'm edging towards I do want to listen to what others are saying, but I think there's an opportunity here perhaps for a deferral to look into if there's anything else that we can do to mitigate this, but I'm open to listen to what's being said.
Okay, Councillor Sokol.
Yeah, Chair, I have been on the site visit. First thing it came to my mind, honestly, when I was told that's the site where is going to be there, right on the very close to this property number 4, yeah. I wouldn't like that. I wouldn't, honestly, yeah. Not this application, anywhere else, yeah. So I like the building over there, development over there, extra care home, yeah. But I wouldn't like to penalize some other members of the community down there. I think officer must think about to relocate or move from there a bit further somewhere elsewhere. Thank you.
Councillor Rahman.
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to commend Mr Purnell on his presentation, which I thought was useful and very well researched. I think we're getting quite a chorus building up, and I agree with my colleagues. I'm uncomfortable with the siting of this unit, whatever you want to call it, the air source heat pumps. I think they could be put in a less obtrusive place, and by obtrusive I mean in terms of noise and vibration rather than visual amenity. I think they will have an unsupportable effect, to my mind, on a nearby resident. I think they could, with a bit of effort, perhaps a bit more cost, I don't know, but they could be sited in a better place, I think. Having said that, with your approval, I also would like to hear what the developer has to say at this point. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll just bring in Louise first, and then we can potentially go to the developer. Just, yeah, Louise, it'd just be good to understand, because I think there's obviously been a bit of question around the options, why those particular options and stuff. Obviously, we can ask the applicant, but I don't know if you've got anything to add from the comments made so far.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair. The paragraph 10.12 of the committee report sets out in more detail the reasons for discounting 3 of the 4 different locations. Principally, it was to do with access and maintenance, and we explored that further with the applicant to understand quite what that entailed in terms of equipment needing to be brought out to those sites. For those on the visit this morning, we could see that one of the sites was up against a retaining wall next to the public open space in the communal gardens, which was not accessible with a vehicle. Location 2 was to the west of the site. There was another property there with a deck balcony, but there were also issues of proximity to the prow that now runs down there. Option 3 was a void under the ground floor of the building, but there wasn't sufficient height. So the option before members today is location 4. So those are approximately the reasons why those other sites have been discounted. In terms of the what the noise report says, so after applying corrections for tonality and intermittency, table 3 of the noise report shows a 12 decibel exceedance equating to a significant adverse impact at 4 coach house paddocks at night time, and as such the mitigation is required, and the mitigation fitting the acoustic kit and having the height of the walls to 2.6 metres, which is what they would be on the plans. That's been assessed by Environmental Health, and the advice given from Environmental Health is that that is acceptable in terms of noise impact. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Ricky, so obviously there were some questions there just towards yourself around, I think the main thing is we've looked at, when we were on the site, obviously there was some options that were looked at in terms of other sightings, and I think the question I'm getting back from the committee is why was it those options as opposed to, I think you referred Councillor Pinnock to somebody somewhere sort of to the west of the site. I'm guessing you're meaning in what's proposed as the car park area. I don't know if you could answer that just so that we've got a clear understanding on those.
Yep, thank you. So to the west of the bin store, any further past that point, we can't impact on that area because there's already a planning condition in place on the car park area. So where the bin store ends on the plan, any further past that point has already got conditions imposed on it to be delivered in the layout that's currently there.
Okay, thank you. Louise, do you want to just comment? You agree with that?
Through you, Chair. So I think the location that members are referring to is further west, will be sited within the car park. The implications from a site in there would be in relation to obviously the approved car parking layout as being probably one of the principal things we'd have to look at for siting further west. Thank you, Chair.
So just to check then, if something was proposed like that, that would require a new application in terms of other further amendments basically around the parking, and it might mean that there wasn't sufficient parking provision, depending on how that could be, if that could be actually reconstituted. And I guess there has to be a certain gap between some pumps and parked cars and that sort of thing as well. Okay. Okay, Councillor Thompson, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. So, as I understand, if I could have clarity, two of the alternatives, one was not accepted because it was too near a prow. Is that, yeah? So it's too near a public right of way rather than too near somebody's dwelling that's there 24/7, and the other is because of a condition that's on a car park.
So just to clarify, right, so there was, I think there's a few different things here. So what was referred to as the car park that we were just discussing then wasn't looked at as an option for the reasons that the applicants just referred to. There were a couple of other sites looked at. So both of those were close to the prow, but one of them was similarly located close to a property, so it would have been a similar sort of discussion. And both of them are not accessible in terms of vehicle accessibility, because obviously it's on a prow, it's in the garden area basically of the thing. So I think those were the reasons for those two, which I personally, having been on the site, agree that they're not really suitable locations. Councillor Scott, did you have your hand up first? Yep.
I think you've just answered it, Chair, some of it, but am I right in saying that if you do Matthias, did you want to come in? No, right. So if we did consider where the car park is on the original application, does it have to be a new application if you were looking at, do the investigative to see if that variation could happen where we could move the pump? Because I just think that it's key here, because this is 24/7 that somebody's going to be listening to this humming noise, which is highly intrusive. Highly intrusive.
Well, I'll let Councillor Army, I think you had your hand. Did you have your hand up? You go first.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like a bit of clarity, because I'm a little bit confused, but apparently one of the rejected sites for this equipment refers to a lack of headroom. I'm just wondering, could that be addressed by an excavation which would increase headroom? Why not?
Okay. Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. One of the problems we've got here is that there, in the original application, which was enthusiastically supported at committee, I don't think anybody noticed that there was any provision for heating, I think maybe we assumed that it was somewhere inside the building. I don't know, but we've got an amendment application here. Once all the other bits of the application have been dealt with, including the car park, because that was in the original application. Now, you might say, well, this is a bit unfortunate, because if we want to move this air source heat pump site onto that car park area, then it needs another application. Well, that's an organisational issue which we would have to sort out. But I want to propose that we defer this so that we look at all the options that can, in some way or other, remove the heat pumps from a close association with a house next to the site. And I include number 14 Kenmore Drive, which is also relatively close to the site. It mustn't get too close to that either. So that people go away, officers and applicants go away and look at all possible options, completely clean slate, if you like, and see how that works, because I think there is a feeling amongst all the members of this committee that, or most of the members of the committee, that we are not happy, whatever mitigation measures are proposed in having a noise source of the type that's been described very close to a house, and it's admittedly close to the house. All the documents relating to the application refer to it as a very sensitive receptor. So I would like to propose deferral for those reasons, and I hope that I've got a supporter.
I'll bring you in a second, Taz. I was just going to say that from my perspective, I think the only thing we need to be careful of on this one is that, yes, there will be noise caused by that, but by that that's understood, and that's clear, because then it's around what mitigations should they be taken and are they sufficient. And the discussion, and I guess the discussion here is that the noise consultant and our environmental health officers have looked at something and said, we think this is the right level of mitigation and will resolve the problem. But you know, the objective has also has done the same thing and come to a different conclusion. So that's what we're trying to grapple with. So it's a tricky one. But Matthias, you want to come in now?
Very quickly, I think Councillor Pinnock and yourself, Chair, have summed up the debate as far as I can read it. It is important to remember that you're here to assess the suitability of the site on the plan, not the other options. You can ask us to explore that, but you may end up having to make a decision on that point. And then the bit about procedures, we'll have to look into whether it needs a fresh application to vary any other locations and conditions associated with it. But I get the sense that the committee wants us to consider something else, but it's so Chair, but we can't design it here.
Councillor Lee Richards, gone.
Hi, just from personal experience, I had a relative who had a single air source heat pump that their neighbour sited close to their boundary, and that was one small air source heat pump, and that caused them an enormous amount of problems having to get it mitigated because of the sound that it emitted. So 4 industrial size ones is very concerning.
Okay, so what I think what we're just having a discussion. So I think what we're saying is members on the basis of the current plans are not particularly comfortable with it. So rather than to refuse the application, they're asking for it to be deferred to look at, is there another alternative, or is there additional mitigations that could satisfy everybody? Is that correct? Yeah.
Chair, can I ask, is that include the car park area as well? You say, thank you.
So what Matthias said, like I said, we can't design it right now, but I think that's understood as what people had suggested, okay, as options. Yeah. Okay, so we've had a mover and seconded to defer it. Sorry, Councillor Scott, you okay? Yeah, so we'll vote on deferral, okay?
So you're voting on deferral. Councillor Sokol?
For.
Councillor Scott?
For.
Councillor Lee Richards?
For.
Sorry, I went out of. Councillor Pinnock?
For.
Councillor Thompson?
For.
Councillor Armour?
For.
Councillor Homewood?
For.
That's unanimous, Chair. Defer.
Okay, we'll defer that till next meeting.
How long have we taken? That's all right, only half an hour.
Okay, so the next item we've got is a pre-application at New Mills, Marsden. Just before we start this application, just wanted to, obviously I think members are probably aware of this, but it is a pre-application, so we're not looking to make a decision. And anything that the idea of this is to give a view from the committee on what our thoughts are, our local ward members' thoughts are, and what we think the important community, things for the community to consider are. Any comments, is not about determining the application. It doesn't bind the council to anything. The only thing we just need to remind all members is it is a public meeting, and obviously you can predetermine yourself on a future application if you make comments which suggest you've already determined what your view is on a future application. So just bear that in mind in any comments you're looking to make. Okay. Okay, so hand over to Victor for this one.
Thank you, Chair. Victor Grayson, Development Management Master Planner in the Majors and Minerals team. This is item 10 on today's agenda, which concerns a pre-application inquiry relating to a mixed-use development at New Mills, Marsden. Members will recall that this case was previously brought to this committee in June last year, and the report before members today provides an update on how the proposals have developed since then. I'll just quickly run through these few slides to remind members of the site's constraints and opportunities and of the relevant planning policies. So this is the site. The red line boundary indicates where the site is in the centre of Marsden. The blue line is land also owned by the pre-applicants, who are the Crowther family. This is an aerial view of the site. The site is almost entirely covered by existing buildings of varying ages. It's a valley bottom site. The River Colne runs along part of the northern boundary of the site and then continues beneath some of the existing buildings within the site. The site's approximately 1.5 hectares in size, and it's, as I said, right in the centre of Marsden. Marsden District Centre is just to the west of the inquiry site. In terms of designations and allocations in the local plan, the shading that covers most of this image is the Marsden Conservation Area, so the entire site is within the conservation area. Also shown in blue are listed buildings, including the Tenter posts immediately to the north of the site and Marsden Mechanics Hall. Those are Grade 2 listed buildings. And then the darkest blue lines indicate water courses, and as I said earlier, buildings cover much of these. The site is allocated in the local plan as site MXS 11 for mixed-use development. There's an expectation in that site allocation for a development of 29 dwellings plus just under 3,000 square metres of employment floor space. And the text here, which is from the local plan site allocations document, flags up some of the site's constraints, including the Marsden Conservation Area. And it continues and lists some of the site-specific considerations relevant to the site. Deculverting of the River Colne, where it passes through the site, is expected where possible, and members, you'll be aware that that's also an expectation set out in local plan policy LP 27. Residential amenity is also mentioned here, as is the desirability of retaining the site's existing buildings unless their loss is justified. I'll just show you this plan as well that numbers and colour codes the existing buildings on the site. This is the same image as you've seen in the committee report. It helps to identify the existing buildings. The Eastern Mill, that's number 1, and the Western Mill, that's 7 and 20, are the most prominent buildings in longer views of the site. These contribute positively to the character and appearance of the conservation area, as do their associated towers and the bridges between those buildings, which are A, B, C and D, a little harder to see in this image. Buildings 3 and 4 fronting Brougham Road are also positive contributors, and building 11, the former engine house, is also noteworthy. That's just next to building 20 there. Other buildings within the site make less of a contribution to the conservation area's character and appearance. This is a Google Street View image of the view from Brougham Road. You can see here the Western Mill, including the impressive elevation of the former Wages Office. That's the southern elevation of Building 7. And you can also see here the Eastern Mill and the bridges between the two mill buildings. And then this is a view from the north, looking from Warehouse Hill Road. Again, you can see the Eastern and Western Mills. The river is just below this image in the bottom right-hand corner. And members might recall that a planning permission was previously granted for parts of this site in 2006. That permission was not implemented and it has since expired, but just for members' information, this is a site plan from that application. That approved scheme included demolition of the Eastern Mill, as well as demolition of buildings at the west end of the site. It involved the retention of the Western Mill with a new vehicular entrance access opened up through it. A vehicular entrance to the site was proposed off Brougham Road, and the site also then included land south of Brougham Road. Members, you probably remember in June last year I went through a number of options that the pre-applicant team had considered for this site. I won't go through all of them today, but I'll just mention a couple. This option 5 is the scheme upon which the decision by the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities to award £5.6 million of levelling up funding in March 2023 was based. And that involved, as you can see here, the demolition of the Eastern Mill, demolition of the southern part of the Western Mill and other buildings, and the erection of new buildings, as illustrated in this slide. The pre-applicant team also considered this option, option 6. Now, this was the option presented here at committee in June 2024, which was the option preferred at the time by the pre-applicant team. That again involved the demolition of the Eastern Mill, the southern part of the Western Mill and other buildings. Vehicular access was proposed from Brown Road. New buildings were proposed, they're shaded turquoisey blue in that slide. There was no plan to deculvert the River Colne in this option, and members can see in the bottom corner there the mix of uses that were proposed then, including 21 flats in the retained part of the Western Mill and also light industrial, retail and offices in the new and retained buildings. But disregard that, members, because the applicant team have moved on from that option to this option, which is the option that the pre-applicant team are now progressing. Briefly, to summarise, this retains the Eastern Mill, which is a positive move, which wasn't seen in the previous two options that I showed a minute ago. It also retains a larger part of the Western Mill, although it loses the southern end, the wages office. It retains the 2 towers and the engine house attached to the 2 main mill buildings, and it also retains most of the buildings fronting Brougham Road east of the site entrance. The 2 mill buildings in this scheme would be weatherproofed for later conversion. And in another very positive move, the applicant team now proposes to deculvert the River Colne in the northeast part of the site, shown in this slide. Elsewhere across the site, where other buildings are shown to be demolished, as previously proposed, new parking areas, 132 spaces, and new landscaped areas are shown. No footbridge is shown over the River Colne in this option. In terms of uses, there's a summary in the bottom right-hand corner there of this slide, and the table at paragraph 9.3 of the committee report compares what's now proposed with the local plan's expectations for this site. In terms of phasing, at application stage, the applicant team are likely to propose the demolition works, the weatherproofing of the mill buildings, the deculverting of the river, the conversion of the Brougham Road buildings, and the erection of the new building behind it as part of a first phase. And then the conversion of the retained mills would come forward in a later phase when that element becomes viable. This likely phasing will be reflected in the hybrid planning application that the team intend to submit, under which full planning permission would be sought for everything except for the mill buildings, for which outline permission would be sought. So, members, that's briefly where the proposals have got to. They've evolved in light of site investigation work, design work, financial viability assessment and discussions with officers and the local community that have been taking place over the last 2 years. As mentioned last year at committee, there is potential for significant public benefits arising from redevelopment at the site, including job creation, positive economic impacts, enhancement of the district centre and bringing a large accessible brownfield site back into use. It's also relevant to note again, members, that no development has happened at this site in the over 20 years since production here ceased, despite a permission being issued in 2006. And also, as I mentioned last year, at application stage, there will need to be a balancing of planning considerations where the public benefits of the scheme are weighed against its shortcomings and harm. We are expecting the forthcoming application to come with a viability appraisal and other information that would help explain why, for example, the wages office can't be restored or replaced with a new building. In the meantime, comments and questions from members on these latest proposals are welcomed. Obviously, as Chair said, no decision needs to be made today. However, points raised by members will need to be noted by the pre-applicant team as they continue to work up their proposals. And through you, Chair, if it's okay, I'll hand over to the applicant team to expand on some of the key issues relevant to the proposed development. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah. we're not too worried about the amount of time, but if you not 2 hours if you can.
I'll try and avoid 2 hours. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I have got some notes, and I was hoping not to have to stick to 3 minutes. I wasn't sure how much Victor was going to say, but thanks very much for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. As Victor said, we're still at the pre-application stage, so we're keen to hear your feedback as we get closer to submitting an application on this site. When I spoke to you in June last year, we were much earlier in the process. We were still looking at strategic options, and with your guidance from that session, second public consultation event that we held in December, and also the benefit of lots of officer time since then, we've made a lot of progress in finding an option that we think can work. I'm sure you'll all understand that this is a complex project. Most of the last year has been spent on trying to understand technical elements of the project, doing more site investigation work, working out construction costs, and trying to find a positive balance between the various competing technical considerations that we're dealing with here, notably the kind of the heritage interests on the site and also the transport requirements. You'll also recall that there's government funding in place at the moment, and I'm sure you're all aware of the mounting pressures on government finances. So we're increasingly concerned about the risk that this poses, and we want to make sure that the unspent funds aren't redirected to other priorities. So it's becoming really important that we make use of the funding that's already been secured so it's not lost. So working closely with your heritage and planning officers has helped us define this proposal that has kept most of the buildings of heritage interest and which addressed all of the main planning concerns. But unfortunately, with the other work that we'll be doing over the last year, we've also identified increasing costs, and that means that the ideal proposal is not something that's economically viable at the moment. So we've decided that the best way forward is to phase our approach to the site. So this approach will mean that we don't lose the secured funding because we'll be getting on with a project that keeps the main buildings of interest, but also then doesn't get in the way of other project elements being delivered over time. So even if we can't deliver them now, we're hoping that some of those things will still happen. We spent some time talking to the community trust and the ward councillors about this, and there does remain a desire to see something happen on this site sooner rather than later. Obviously the buildings are deteriorating. You'll have probably picked up from some of the photos that Victor's shown, and they're deteriorating quickly, which is causing a bit of a concern in the village about safety and also longer term the potential loss of those buildings over time. So in simple terms, we need to get on with something, and doing the first phase of works seems to be the best way to secure the site, spend the funding we have, and set the project up to succeed over time. So in practice, that means focusing on the works that the funding was granted to deliver. That's the industrial courtyard to the east of the site, which we deliver in full, creating the jobs and meeting the demand that we know exists in the area now. We also need to make sure that the main mill buildings are preserved and secured, so we'll repair those, make them weathertight and safe, but not spend money on converting them at this stage. We do intend to apply for the uses of those buildings so that we know what to assess in the application, but we would do that in outline so that the details are a bit more flexible for the future. So when those future uses are brought forward, we can also complete some of the related works that you've seen on the plan there. So like a formalised car parking area to the west of the site, close to Peel Street. In the meantime, it's likely that that area will be a gravel surface car park, which could help to relieve some of the existing local parking pressures. It's also worth just briefly outlining some of the costs that are involved in this project so that you can understand the scale of the problem that we're dealing with here. So over the last year, we've managed to agree what I would call an ideal proposal that could get us probably through all the planning hoops that we need to get through, and that included a number of elements that would result in a really positive development. But when it was costed, we found that the funding was about 40 million quid short. So clearly that's not going to be a viable option. The funding gap was enormous. So even with that funding that we've got now, the sort of 5.5 million quid, it would still not have been possible to deliver that ideal project. But there is still a pressing need to do something positive at New Mills, and there's a growing pressure to make sure that we've maximised the benefit of that funding that we already have. So to make this work, there are some elements of the projects that we just simply can't do at this stage. So the retention of the part of the mills that had the old wages office has been the subject of a lot of discussion with officers over the last year. I think we have agreed that this area of the building needs to be demolished so that a suitable site access point can be created. So the main issue with that is the internal visibility within the site. So with the eastern mill also being kept, the visibility from the eastern part of the site when you're coming out of the courtyard can't be achieved, and that makes that access point unsafe. So it is a real shame that we have to take that part of the building down, but it's necessary from that safety perspective. We've also discussed the potential to replace that building with a structure that gives the necessary space for access, but also has some of that physical presence that the current building on Brougham Road has. However, given that the project is significantly short of funding, not replacing that building is one of the compromises that we think has to be made. And that takes several £1 million worth of cost away and therefore narrows the funding gap by quite a lot. So we recognise that's going to leave a gap at the site entrance where there's a very imposing building at the moment. That will allow views into the site, which will help encourage people into and through the site, and it also presents an opportunity for a new open space area, and that's being designed by a leading landscape architecture firm at the moment, and that will provide some community space as well as reflecting the historic character of the area and the site. So that's a work in progress. I don't have anything to show you today, but the intention is that that would be a high quality open space with planting, hard landscaping and some seating. We also previously proposed a decked car park in the west of the site with a building sitting above that. That was mostly to meet the parking demand that was created by keeping more of the existing mill space, as well as providing for a range of retail and office uses that would have added to the offer available in the village. However, we decided to reduce the amount of retail and office space proposed so that we can reduce that parking demand. And that means that we can focus on providing more residential uses in the mills, as there is a need for that locally, and also housing has a reduced need for dedicated parking. So another key element that isn't in this phase 1 proposal is the new footbridge over the river. We agreed that providing that would be really helpful in opening up the site, and it would allow people living to the north and east of Marsden to get to Peel Street without having to divert around the site. And we're really supportive of that happening. But we can't justify the cost of that work at this stage. We really need to divert that funding towards keeping the additional mill buildings and making sure that this application sets a positive framework for future development on the site. So whilst it won't be in this application, that doesn't mean it can't happen. We want it to go ahead, so we won't be doing anything that gets in the way of that footbridge being delivered in the future. We just need to need some extra funding to make it happen sooner. However, we do think it's necessary to open up the river. This is primarily because of policy expectations about deculverting rivers, but also due to safety concerns. So at the moment, the river's covered by a fairly thin concrete slabs with buildings built over the top, and we're a bit concerned, and structural engineers are a bit concerned, that when we take those buildings away, the slab isn't going to be particularly strong in its own right and it could collapse, and that presents a major safety concern. So we just have to remove that kind of risk from the project for obvious reasons. And that actually adds an unexpected cost back into the project, but we don't think there's a sensible way of avoiding it. So that would also bring some positive environmental change. It would open up a new section of Riverside Walkway in the village, and it's generally a positive outcome from a policy perspective as well. As you might expect, many people are still worried about the traffic implications of this project and car parking. It's an existing problem in Marsden that everyone probably knows about. And we are working on changes to the roads around the site. This is likely to involve a change to Brougham Road, with a section of it becoming one-way, probably. We also plan to widen Crowther Bruce Mill Road where it meets Brougham Road to allow two-way traffic to get through there. It's quite tight at the moment. So there will be changes in the wider area, and these will need to work with the wider Marsden Master Plan document that's nearing completion. Most of the people we've spoken to about this are very pragmatic about the site and recognise that the ultimate outcome has to work financially. There are always going to be differences in opinion on how to approach a prominent site like this, but the overriding feedback we've had is very positive, and there's a general desire to see something done here before the buildings deteriorate further and potentially fall down. But this site does present us with a difficult balancing exercise, and we'd value your inputs on how to take this forward. Our solution obviously has to be viable and deliverable, otherwise it just won't happen. and we've reluctantly concluded that we can only deliver a framework for the development of this site at this stage with the money that we've got available now. So we're looking at how we can raise more funding through various means, but we can't rely on that happening quickly, and we also can't risk delaying more in case we lose the funding that we have. So we know that there is an ideal solution, which would be to convert all of the mill space, provide the footbridge, replace the wages office, and that would be a great project. But that isn't going to be affordable without a major change in funding availability. So our preferred approach is to find the best way forward that sets the site up for success and then works with the market, alternative funding streams, and hopefully allows the project to benefit from future economic improvements. We think that's the best approach that we can adopt to help meet the objectives of the local plan and to minimise heritage concerns that come from demolishing some of these buildings in the conservation area. So we're aiming to create something positive for Marsden here, a solution that brings jobs and investment to the local economy, deals with the long-standing issue of what will happen with these rapidly deteriorating buildings. So the main reason for us being here today is to see what you think, help shape the final stages of this phase 1 application and hopefully move forward to a planning application fairly quickly. And we'd really value your inputs on that. So thanks for your time. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you. So what I'll do is I'll bring in the ward councillors first and then I'll come to members. So Councillor McLaughlin, you first. You've got 5 minutes. That's all right.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak. And I would like to begin by making it clear that this pre-application and the investment into the new mills are extremely welcome. The redevelopment of the site is an enormous opportunity to bring benefit to Marsden and to the whole of Colne Valley. I would also like to publicly thank Mike and Matthew and the whole Crowther team for the effort and consideration that they have put into engaging positively with us as local councillors and the wider community. This positive engagement will make all the difference and is much appreciated. As ward councillors, our engagement with the New Mills Levelling Up project has been based on 5 things. Parking, to ensure that the development has enough parking on site and preferably some additional parking to alleviate pressure on Marsden Village. Traffic, ensure that the development has minimal impact on highway safety and the flow of traffic and preferably brings benefit to both. Heritage, preserve as much of the site's industrial heritage as possible. For benefit the wider village, to try to provide some wider benefit to the wider village community and to complement the village's existing businesses. And the Marsden Blueprint, to ensure the development aligns as closely as possible with the Marsden Blueprint and the results of the What Matters to Marsden Place Standards survey. We would also like to see affordable and preferably social housing provided on site, although we recognise that this is extremely hard to deliver given the viability challenges. We are very pleased to see the number of residential units proposed increased from 21 to 60. We have engaged on the basis that do nothing is a potential choice and the abandonment of the mills to let them deteriorate further would be the worst of all possible worlds. There are huge challenges on this site, balancing viability and heritage, meaning that trade-offs are inevitable. We believe that the latest proposals are a huge step in the right direction from where we started, which would have involved the demolition of the Eastern Mill and all buildings fronting Brougham Road. The sad loss of the old wages office and the overhead bridges between the mills are a shame, but it does appear that there is literally and figuratively no way around it. The opening up of the River Colne is another huge positive addition to the scheme, though a new footbridge between the site and Warehouse Hill Road over the river must be reconsidered. We don't know the design details of the new build properties on the East and Eastern Mill. These ought to be sympathetic to the conservation area. We also need to see the details of a new public space and landscaping area on the site of the old wages building, particularly considering just how prominent these buildings currently are on Brougham Road. As I say, the Crowthers have engaged with the community and ward councillors and the council in good faith throughout, and this is a positive part of the scheme. We still do have some concerns, although we recognise that balancing the 5 priorities mentioned previously with trying to create a viable scheme is very difficult. In particular, ensuring that the increased parking provision benefits the wider village might be best secured via a formal planning condition. There is a local precedent for this at Slowett Aldi on the former Colne Mills site. This provides 3 hours free parking in the supermarket car park, which benefits the wider village. With Marsden Village Co-op showing keen interest in rehoming into the new mills development, could we perhaps take a leaf from Slowett Aldi's planning book? Regardless, the priority must be to make ensure that there is enough parking for residential and commercial units on the site to prevent adding more pressure onto Marsden's already struggling parking and highways infrastructure. We would also like to see any traffic regulation order or highway schemes implemented to align with the outcomes of the speed limit review project at Marsden Junior and Infant School, especially reducing speed limits through the centre of the village to 20 miles an hour. The new footbridge over the River Colne is likely to be a significant sticking point for the scheme, with key members of the community citing significant concerns about its absence from this pre-application. The footbridge needs to remain an ambition of the whole development, given the benefits this will have to the Levelling Up project and the positive contribution this will bring to pedestrian movement across the village, complementing the recent canal towpath resurfacing and the upcoming improvements to the bridge on Grange Street by the TRU, and finally providing a solution to the problems of road safety on Warehouse Hill Road, which lacks pavements and is unsafe currently. In our view, the footbridge ought to be included in the scheme's master plan and Kirklees' Marsden blueprint, and it should be a strategic aim of the project, but given the viability challenge of phase 1 of the project, it will be a longer term aim. Because of the viability challenges on site, we hope the hope is for it to go for a more achievable project in the first instance, in the hope that a successful first phase will attract funding and support for further phases. This leaves open the possibility of the footbridge and the deck car park in the future, but the footbridge in particular should remain a stated strategic aim of the project. Finally, however, I would like to restate our gratitude to the Crowthers and their team for the real and meaningful engagement with ourselves, the community and the council. This is our last chance to do something about these mills and to secure benefits for the people of Colne Valley. Doing nothing is the worst of all possible worlds. We want to see this project come to fruition and succeed, and we are all keen to do everything we can to make it work. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy, hopefully you can hear us on Teams. If you want to speak as well, you can. Take it you do. You've got 5 minutes.
Cheers. Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So the redevelopment of new mills presents a massive opportunity for Marsden. This site has been vacant for too long and is currently an eyesore. We have the opportunity to bring much needed jobs and housing to Marsden while preserving the industrial heritage of the Colne Valley and enhancing Marsden, providing much needed parking and traffic improvements. I'd like to say at the offset as well that the applicant has gone out of their way to engage with the local community, conducting their own non-statutory consultation and also engaging with local businesses and community groups for the Marsden Community Partnership. As Matthew has already said, there's a few key areas of concern that we've engaged with the developer on. Firstly, would be heritage. These buildings are not just an integral part of the Colne Valley landscape, they're also a part of our history. It means a lot to me personally, as my great-grandfather worked for the Crowthers in Marsden, and like most families in the area, most of my family members are connected to textile manufacturing in one way or the other. The proposals laid out today are a huge step in the right direction, especially when compared to the plans that form the basis for the initial Levelling Up fund bid. The initial plans would involve the demolition of the entire Eastern Mill and all of the buildings fronting at Brougham Road. The latest proposals involve the retention of both the Eastern and Western Mill and the buildings on Brougham Road, with the unfortunate exception of the Wages Office. I also note that Councillor Pinnock in the last pre-application meeting mentioned the sky bridges, and it's positive to mention some of these being retained in the latest proposals. The demolition of the Wages Office is regrettable, but it's difficult to see how a financially viable scheme is possible without at least some demolition, and also how would it be possible to conduct the necessary parking and access works without at least some demolition. I'd also remind the committee that the choice here isn't between keeping some or all of the buildings, it's between retaining some of them and none of them. We're against the clock here. The buildings are continuing to deteriorate and they won't last much longer. This is our chance to secure Marsden's industrial heritage, and we need to seize the opportunity now. There are some outstanding issues here, particularly in regard to the quality of the new builds to the east of the site. We need to make sure these are sympathetic to Marsden Village surroundings as possible. And we also need to see the detail of the landscaping on the site of the old Wages building. But the direction of travel here has been very, very positive, and I'm very happy to see that as a ward councillor. Secondly, parking. Like a lot of Pennine villages, Marsden struggles with adequate parking. Brom Road and Peel Street are often clogged with parked cars. Visitors, residents and businesses often struggle to find adequate parking, and sometimes inappropriately parked vehicles can cause issues with passing vehicles. The extra car parking spaces within the walking distance of the pubs, cafes, restaurants and shops on Peel Street will alleviate the pressure on the on-street parking and make Marsden a much more attractive place to come and visit. We could do some things to strengthen the parking position in this proposal. For example, as Matthew mentioned previously, the parking condition at Slough Aldi, that provides 3 hours of free parking for the benefit of the whole village, not just the supermarket, which has been a big benefit to businesses in Slough. And also we can make use of the vacant plot south of the Brom Road, south of Brom Road, opposite the development, which could be utilised for parking. Thirdly, traffic and highway safety. There are currently issues with pedestrians and vehicles getting around Marsden Village Centre. There are also 2 schools in close proximity to the site. The infant school on Brom Road, which is directly opposite the mill, and also the junior school on Manchester Road. The junction between Brom Road and Peel Street, where the mechanic sits, has no pavement and is often dangerous for people to pass. There are often inappropriately parked vehicles, which makes it difficult for cars to go past, and also many of the roads surrounding the site are limited in width and have no footway. This scheme opportunities to address all these problems, but I would bring your attention to the speed limit review project, as officers from the West Yorkshire Combined Authority have recently spoken to pupils, teachers and families to draw up an action plan to tackle highway safety issues. It would be good to make sure that we tie everything into this project. I know that officers have been looking at a traffic regulation order, which would possibly look at, for example, making part of Brom Road one way. It'd be good to tie all these things in and also provide benefits for the local pupils in the area. For example, bringing down the speed limit in Marsden to 20 miles an hour might make it much safer. Also, securing benefits for the whole of Marsden. We mentioned previously in my speech, mentioned some of the ways that this development will help people in Marsden. But just to mention the footbridge, it would be a fantastic pedestrian link between Warehouse Hill Road and also beyond there, the Marsden Lane and the Durker Estate to the mill and the village centre. It fits in nicely with the upcoming accessibility improvements to Marsden Station and the improvements to walking and cycling provision on the canal towpath between Slough and Marsden. I appreciate it's really, really challenging financially, but we should explore all options to retain this feature given the health and community benefits. I'd also bring your attention to the deculverting of the River Cone.
Harry, I'll give you a couple more seconds, but you've had about 6 minutes now, so if you could finish up what you're saying, then I'll let members come in. Give you 30 more seconds.
Just to bring your attention to the deculverting of the River Cone, this will have really positive environmental benefits to the wider village. Thank you, Chair. Cheers.
Okay, so members, Councillor Army, you indicated, and then...
Yes, thank you, Chair. I will speak in general terms because I wouldn't wish to be accused of predetermining or prejudging any application that comes forward. And actually, I'm going to disagree with the ward councillors because Marsden, which I know well, I've always thought of it as a small town rather than a village, but there you go, that's it. This scheme ticks a lot of boxes for me. In particular, I really like to see brownfield being reused, brought back from the dereliction that it faces. I also personally approve very much of town, or if you like, village centre housing. I think it does help to get the mix of commercial, industrial housing, because that's the way our towns and villages evolved originally. And I think it's important to do that. I'd like to see that happening in Huddersfield as well. And heritage is very, very important. There's a great deal of heritage up the Colne Valley. Most, 99% of it textile, which was a very, very major, historically very major industry. We can't have everything. We all realise, I think, that we have to make compromises between what we'd like and what we can afford. And I think this scheme, in general terms, seems to represent a good attempt at reaching a compromise. Let me put it that way. Of course, the cost, as ever, is a problem. I take the point that there is a sense of urgency. These buildings, which we may wish to retain, are deteriorating. So there is to that sense of urgency. There's also a sense of urgency around funding. Pick that up very, very clearly. So it's just a personal view at this stage, is that it's right to retain as much as possible of the heritage. We do have to find a compromise between what we can afford and what we would like to afford. Oh, I would like to see a footbridge, because at the moment the culverting seems to cross the Colne, just seems to provide a route across the Colne. And I'll leave it at that, thank you.
Yep. Councillor Scott, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. My first thoughts was, who wouldn't welcome this on this site? I think it was interesting in the presentation that it said the previous application was done in 2006 and nothing materialised. So you've got an opportunity, phased approach, which I thought was absolutely fantastic, that you're looking at developing and allowing something to happen. One of the key challenges is about keeping it in line to the local people, what the community want, and working with the schools. I think it was good to hear from the perspective of the ward councillors. If anybody knows best, a ward councillor knows what their area wants. I think, as I say, I want it to, for me, it's got to be sympathetic to the conservation area. It's important that you get the traffic and the parking right. That is key on balance, because if anything, these little small villages, that is always a problem. So it's about that as well. I just think it's good to see a brownfield site coming through, but and I understand the urgency, but it's also about at pace, getting it right, but working with rather than doing to. And I think ward councillors will be key in this, instrumental, knowing where it needs to be.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Lee Richards.
Sorry, I was just looking at the one with the numbers on it. So do we take it that it is sort of mostly the blue ones, the infill old weaving sheds that are looking to be demolished, and retaining the major mill buildings? I went and had a look around the outside last night. It was getting a bit dusk, but I do know Marsden reasonably well from visiting it. And this looks a really exciting project. Can I just ask, the wages office, is that this one? That's the one that would have to be lost. Well, I suppose there do have to be compromises, and the idea of deculverting the river, for the environmental benefits is good. And if we can have a footbridge built into the future plan, I think that would also be advantageous to the village or town, whichever you think Marsden is. And yes, the small school on Brum Road was open last night. I take it was parents' evening because the lights were on when I walked round. So yes, approval and improve, especially for the increase of residential as well. And if it's working with the local ward councillors, it's improving parking, traffic, and maintaining as much of the heritage as possible. I think it's a great scheme. So just obviously wants to be monitored, and I'd like to see some 3D graphics when they're available. It looks a very positive scheme, and it will be a shame to lose all of it because it crumbles. So, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Sokol.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's good to see the local ward councillor, local community and the applicant are working together to preserve this very historic mill. Although it's not a listed building, but I've been on the site visit some time ago. Yeah, it's a beautiful building. Yeah, and the applicant and with the support of the local ward councillor, they got the funding yeah, which is the government funding over 5 million, I think, yeah, and they might get some more funding somewhere else to complete their scheme, yeah. Here it's not just to preserve the mill, it's the scheme will provide the employment to the local people, especially local in Marsden. It will provide the badly needed housing, yeah, which is just proposal of 60 flats there. So I'm really welcome this scheme, yeah, when you come to the.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that I found really quite refreshing about this was it came in what Councillor McLaughlin had to say, and that is the involvement of the local community as well as local members, obviously. I do wish that many more developers would do this. Too many developers just charge in and do stuff and without talking to anybody, and then wonder why people start getting upset with what they're doing. But all the right things seem to have been done in this case, and long may that continue, frankly, because if you get as many people as possible on board for something like this, it has a greater chance of success. It's not difficult to work out, it seems to me. But I have a question about when I was reading through this, heritage assets. Given that there aren't any listed buildings, I think it would be helpful for somebody who doesn't know the site that well to have to show on any documentation that's used in this case which parts of the site can be considered as heritage assets, or indeed if it's the whole site that's a heritage asset. That's equally good, because although a heritage asset is not the same protection as a listed building, it does, in the planning context, have some importance, and it would be, well, I suppose, concentrate minds if you knew which buildings on the site were heritage assets, if there were any that weren't. I mean, if for example we decided that the wages office was a heritage asset, then maybe that might stop it being demolished. But sorry, that's slightly flippant. But I mean, I mention that because when we did the site visit a couple of years ago, that building's right in your face where we stopped. So it's yeah. But anyway, lots of the right things being done, and I hope that well, I look forward to a brand spanking new planning application.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure on the definitions, but I suppose the point that's been made before is that the wages office is a kind of heritage asset, hence the concern about it, but kind of understanding the weight that we just put on. I don't know if there's anything you specifically want to say on that point. Is it kind of a subjective assessment on that?
To you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, arguably everything on the site could be regarded as a non-designated heritage asset, but the various buildings on the site have different degrees of importance. So, like I mentioned, the two main mill buildings at the centre of the site, which include the wages office at the southern end of the western building, they're significant contributors to the character and appearance of the conservation area, and the two buildings at front Browen Road, they're also significant, as is the engine room that I mentioned. The rest of the buildings on the site make much less of a contribution to the character and appearance of the area, and for that reason officers would recommend that in a redevelopment scheme they could be demolished. In terms of designated heritage assets, there are no listed buildings on the site, as I mentioned. in the committee report, but the conservation area itself is a designated heritage asset. So obviously the local planning authority has to bear in mind the impact on that designation and that would result from any development at this site.
Thanks. So based on what's been said, then my kind of summarisation would be that we are happy to see this coming forward. We're supportive in principle of it and understand the need to secure the funding and to get moving on it. I think we've discussed the fact that we'd like to preserve as many of the heritage assets as can be, but I think haven't heard any, you know, I think we're understanding of the need for some of those won't be retained, not all of us can be retained, and we understand that, and we're not particularly appalled by any of the suggestions. I think the other things I was hearing was that the footbridge is still something that is something people would like to see, and I think there's a point there around whether that's part of the specific development at the first phase, but how we keep that as part of the longer term strategic plan to make sure it isn't just lost to, you know, well, never going to happen sort of thing. And I think the points around parking were interesting. What can we do there around the road layout, speed limits and parking provisions to make that improvement as much as possible. Those are the kind of key things I heard. I don't know if that gives you what you need, Victor, from us. Is there any other things you wanted us to comment on, or is that happy with that?
That's
feedback?
really useful. Yeah, thank you, members. Thanks for that.
And I should say as well that Councillor Addy did also provide some comments. She couldn't be here today, but I've sent those to Victor, so you'll have those as well if there's anything in there. Okay, everybody happy with that? So we obviously don't need to vote on it, but we're just noting that we've provided that feedback and we're all comfortable, yeah? Right, thanks everybody. That's the meeting concluded, so we'll close it there and see you all next time.